Okay, so for today's setup guide, we are checking out Ludo. So for those of you who's not aware of Ludo, Ludo is a very stripped down, simplified version of Retroarch, which is going to emulate most of your favorite arcade systems and home console systems, as well as portable systems. It's an extremely easy, user-friendly front end to use. So check this one out. Okay, before I start today's setup guides for Ludo front end, make sure to hit notifications, subscribe and like if you like today's video. Really helps my channel out a great deal. Plus it gets you up-to-date retro emulation content daily as I release it. So we're looking at Ludo today. What is Ludo? Ludo is a very simplified version of Retroarch. And when we get into this, you're going to see exactly what I'm saying. So first of all, we're going to just download Ludo itself. I'll leave the link in my description so you can check this out for yourself. And as I'm recording this video, we are currently on version 0.7.1, and just be mindful that this is for 64-bit systems. If you're not sure what this means, then just go to your search bar and type in system information, and we're looking for the system type just here. So if you're say times 64 base PC like mine does, then you're good to go with Ludo. So let's just download for Windows first, and if you've got a Mac or you've got Linux, then obviously you can also use Ludo on those two platforms. I'm going to download this for Windows. So once Ludo's finished downloading, which is less than 50 megabyte, we're going to just open up this extract folder. So once we've opened up this, we're going to just drag out the folder inside. Okay, so let's go back over to the Ludo website, and if we just go to the documentation tab at the top, under emulated consoles, you're going to find a whole list here of what Ludo covers. So this is the entire list as to date of what Ludo emulates. So under system, we got Atari 5200. It covers MSX, MSX2, arcade, so MAME, Nintendo NES, and so on. So all of the most popular systems are pretty much covered in Ludo in a very simplified way too, but we're going to get onto that. Now, whilst we're here under this section, emulated consoles, a lot of people might be a little bit confused because Retroarch for some is a very complex beast, lots of options, and this is where Ludo is very simplified like it claims it is. So if you need to know which BIOS files you need for running games through Ludo, so let's just go to pick a drive for example. So pick a drive is going to be a Retroarch core which Ludo supports. So if we just go to pick a drive, and just here, if we just scroll down, and it's going to tell us here the BIOS files we need for example running Sega CD or Mega CD games. So in terms of figuring out which BIOS files you need for those systems in Ludo, Retroarch or whatever, which requires BIOS files, it's just a simple case really of just going through the list just here of what Ludo covers and actually just finding out here which BIOS files we need. So we've got Sega Saturn, and inside Ludo, Beetle Saturn is going to be the core which is going to work this. Under this information, we've also got the file extension types for each one of these. So for example, Sega Saturn just here is going to ask us for .q games, .ccd, .chd games. It's also going to give us more information here on which BIOS files is required for running Sega Saturn using Beetle Saturn. So very simplified stuff in order to find out which BIOS files you're going to need. So once we've extracted Ludo, let's just go into that folder. So we got ludo.exe just here, and obviously the .executable is going to open up the application itself. Before we do this, let's actually put some games into this Ludo folder. Let's just clean things up a little bit. So inside my games folder, I've got several different systems here ranging from PlayStation 1 down to Sega Mega Drive and say Sega CD. What I'm going to do is just pop my games folder inside of there. I'm also going to pop my BIOS files folder inside of here. So let's open up Ludo for the first time. Just double left click on ludo.exe. Windows protected your PC. If we just go to more info, should you get this window pop up, we're going to go to run anyway. Okay, so Ludo, just like Retroarch, it's going to boot up for the first time in window mode. If we just use a controller, and I'm using a Google Stadia controller, I'm going to go over to settings and press my B button. And just here, we can now switch to video full screen. Okay, so on your first time booting up Ludo, you're not going to have any of these systems. I'm going to show you very easily how to add your systems. We just go right to the end, and I'm going to press the B button on my Google Stadia controller, add games. From here, we can then search for where our games are. I'm going to just go down to desktop, and I'm going to look for my Ludo folder where I've just dragged my games into, Ludo. And I'm going to go down to my games folder, and I'm going to go to scan this directory. Now it says 0 new games found because I've already done this before recording this video. And at this point you will then find the list of your games come up, and you've got all your iconic controllers and systems for those systems that you will emulate using Ludo. Next thing we're going to want to do is add our directory to where our BIOS files are located. So to do this, what we're going to do is just use left D-pad to go to settings, and from settings we can just scroll down to system directory, and from here, just like adding your games, we then need to search for the directory for your BIOS files. Now the 2 dots just here represents going back, so if I press B, that's going to bring me back. And then you need to point this to where your BIOS files folder is. Here we go. And I'm going to select this directory, and now Ludo is now linked up to that BIOS folder. If I press A to come back out, and A again, everything's good to go. So we now got our games, and we also got our BIOS files. Now let me just give you a few heads up. If we go to settings, from settings, we can go down to video filter, and we can change filters on our games, and this is going to apply to everything. So we got everything from raw to smooth to pixel perfect, CRT effect, LCD effect. We also got a dark modes just here, and this changes how Ludo looks. And let me just remind you that rather than manually downloading thumbnails for our games, Ludo actually does this on the fly as you add games. So for example, if I go to my arcade main folder, you'll see that everything's automatically been downloaded for me. So let's boot up one of my favorite games. I'm going to go for 1942. And just remember, unlike Retroarch, Ludo does all the work for you. There's no more loading a core or choosing a core. This does it for you. So let's go for 1942. Press B. But just like Retroarch, inside of Ludo, I'm pressing my Google Stadia button. If you use an Xbox controller, it will be your Xbox button. From here, we can then go down to save states, and we can actually save a state very easily. Just go to save states, save state. That then generates a save file with a screenshot. If I go back into my game again, resume, and just remember I'm pressing A to come out and B to go in. Resume. Now let's go back to save states, press B and load. Now as you can see, that's now loaded my save. If we go to options, from options, we got various different settings for each system. So just remember that just like Retroarch, each system in Ludo is going to have slightly different video settings, etc. So for example, vertical mode, I can enable this. So let's check out a game which requires BIOS files. So my BIOS files are now linked up with Ludo. If I go to something that requires BIOS files, PlayStation, let's open up 007 Tomorrow Never Dies. And as you can see there, I've actually got a CRT filter applied, so you'll notice scan lines on that. If I come out, like I was saying just a minute ago, if I go to settings, from settings, video filter, I can then change the filters. So let's go for pixel perfect and resume. If I go back to settings, video filter, CRT, LCD, raw, main menu, quick menu, resume. And also under PlayStation, for example, if we go back down to options, we're going to have various different options here, such as disabling BIOS. So if you choose true, you're no longer going to see that boot sequence for PlayStation games. Just remember to select that one to false if you want to see that PlayStation BIOS boot screen every time you load up a PlayStation game. And if we scroll down further, if you're finding a game doesn't work, GPU render would normally be the case if you get a black screen. If I change this to Vulkan, or software, or auto, you'll find that your games will likely then boot if you do get a black screen. We also got options here such as internal resolution. Now when you boot up this for the first time, your internal resolution scale is going to be to 1. And if we just go down to multi-sample anti-aliasing, you're also going to find this is on 1. Now I've upscaled my PlayStation games using Ludo. Now I can bump this internal resolution up to 16, but just be mindful, if you've got a potato computer, a lower end computer, this is going to cause severe lag. And also for multi-sample anti-aliasing. So anti-aliasing means that your jagged edges are going to disappear the further up you put this. But just like internal resolution scale, the further you go up, then your computer might lag. Just be aware of this. So if I put these back to default ones, you're going to find that your game is then going to look more like an original PlayStation game. So very pixelated. And if you've got a PlayStation game or any game actually which you're running through Ludo, if you need to swap discs, it's just a very simple case of going down to disk control and then swapping over to disk 2 from here. It really is that simple. We can also take screenshots of our games. Let's go into Mega Drive and open up one of my favourite Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis games, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And again, just like the previous 2 systems I'm emulating using Ludo, we have got the same layout here, such as options. And we can also go back down to settings and change filters. So CRT, main menu, quick menu, resume. And that's it for today's Ludo for Windows setup guide. Like you can see in this video, a very simplified version of Retroarch, and it's giving you the best of everything. Literally the best cores for Sega Mega Drive, for example, as well as using Swan Station, which is Retroarch core nowadays. So anyways, if you like today's little setup guide, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Also join me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. And also be sure to check out my various other front-end emulation setup guides. Anyways, until next time, stay retro.